We have breaking news. The ICC issues arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant. The International Criminal Court said earlier today that it had issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. The court also said it had issued a warrant for the arrest of Mohammed Dief, Hamas's military chief, for crimes against humanity, including murder, hostage taking, and sexual violence. Israel said in August that it had killed Mr. Dief. Joseph Borrell Fonteles, the European Union's top diplomat, called for the arrest warrants to be upheld. Quote, "The decision of the court has to be respected and implemented. This decision is a binding decision on all state parties of the court, which includes all members of the European Union." Folks, Dr. King told us the moral arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
President-elect Donald Trump on Monday confirmed he would declare a national emergency to carry out his campaign promise of mass deportations of migrants living in the U.S. without legal permission. Is this taking the U.S. even closer to a police incarceral state? Let's connect some dots. Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they happen in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that impact the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is Trump's threat of mass deportation. What does it mean? What are the potential impacts on America, the countries from which these people are coming, as well as the U.S. and world economies? My guest joining us this morning is Maru Mora-Villalpando. She's an immigration activist with the group La Resistencia, working to improve the conditions at immigration detention centers and to stop deportations. Maru, good morning. You got up real early for us this morning. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for the invitation and good morning to everyone.
So President-elect Trump has pledged to get started on mass deportations as soon as he enters office. He said this, I think it was the 26th of October, quote, "On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history to get the criminals out. I will rescue every city and town that has been invaded and conquered, and we will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail, then kick them the hell out of our country as fast as possible." Maru, not only is this intent horrific, but the language is incredibly eugenicist. It is incredibly racist as he refers to these human beings as criminals. He's going to rescue every city and town. He uses the word invaded, conquered. Maru, your thoughts?
Yeah, where to even start to begin? Like you said, these events don't happen in a vacuum. It's not like the first time ever this kind of rhetoric has been used. It wouldn't be the first time that mass deportations happen. As a matter of fact, they're constantly happening, and they have continued happening since the building of Department of Homeland Security by the then Bush son president, right? George Bush. So we have seen really mass deportations constantly. It's just most people don't notice it. The infrastructure is there. Now, you would imagine why all of a sudden we have this kind of people talking this way if mass deportations had already happened. And the thing, though, is that you have to excuse this treatment to specific communities as something that is just and something that is needed, something that is important for the public in general, not only in the United States, but you would think in the country, beyond the country, right, in the world. And so this rhetoric to blame specific communities is also not new, right? It has happened throughout history. Especially here in the United States. We can talk about other countries, but I'm going to stay here in what is the United States. And so, we started back in the day with the Chinese Exclusion Act. Let's jump all the way to the mass deportations of Mexicans during after World War II, right? And so if you think of immigration in the United States, it has been linked to what is needed for the economy and the government, not what is needed for people. And so for many years, people migrate here, including Europeans that took over the country. They invaded this country. They stole the lands of Native Americans. Then they brought enslaved people from Africa. And they have really the ones setting the bar, right, for criminality. Yet they have used that term and scapegoating against other communities to deviate from the origins of all criminality, which is really why Europeans taking over this country. And so their formula has been very successful. Blame the specific communities, make people afraid of them, be xenophobic, be racist, because the most recent histories about specific communities have to be black and brown. And so this formula got him into office also the first time, right? Although it's debatable, right? He really didn't win the popular vote. And the first time he kind of won the vote this time, but also it's debatable because a lot of people didn't vote. But the formula does work wherever you go. And so he has seen this second chance to be even more extreme than he already was, to excuse these numbers that are going to definitely increase. And he has all the machinery, the infrastructure is there, and it was there even before him in 2016. So the possibilities for it are really high. And, he's going to play the photo up. He's very theatrical, right? He wants to make sure that people keep seeing him as a TV star. And for that, he needs optics that he will use.
In fact, you mentioned just a little earlier some of the Chinese Exclusion Act and the fact that the Europeans came and invaded this country and stole the land. In terms of immigration, to your point, Trump's processes and procedures aren't new. His language is incredibly vile and horrific, but his action is not inconsistent with standard U.S. policy. There's a reason people called former President Obama the deporter in chief.
Absolutely. I mean, it was Obama really the one that set the standard for high numbers of deportations. So let's go back to Clinton. Clinton is the one that set up the difficulties for many of us to acquire immigration status. It was Reagan that criminalized looking for a job without a social security number. So it was, it's really the 80s and 90s that this process began. Bush's son creates this mass enterprise of immigration detention, and it's Obama the one that starts using it, and he takes it all the way to the top. It was Obama really the one that created the family detention centers that we didn't have before. We didn't have them under Bush. We didn't have them under Reagan. And so it's Trump that comes and takes over and utilizes the machine. But it's Biden the one that increases the number of detentions. Actually, detention numbers really grew under Obama, specifically something that we call digital detention, which is another enterprise within immigration detention that takes people under surveillance 24/7 without being in a prison-like system, right? You're at home, yet you're being surveilled through technology. And those contracts happen to be also contracts of one of the biggest corporations that benefits from detention, which is Geo Group. The digital detention, surveillance monitoring, electronic monitoring is being run by a subsidiary of Geo called BI. And so, it is not new. Obama, we call him the deportation chief.
Deporter in chief, right?
Because really the numbers under him were staggering, and he was supposed to do the opposite. So he deserved that name for sure. And we have to remember that Democrat or Republican, black or white, they really have utilized the machine, and they have really used also the scapegoating against our communities to deviate from the realities of who is to blame for all the bad things that are happening in the country.
You just referred to this as a mass enterprise, and that the mass enterprise was initially implemented by one of former President Bush's sons. A lot of people understand the prison industries as it relates to American citizens that are incarcerated, but a lot of people really don't understand the business enterprise behind immigrant detention and the contracts and the wealth that is being created in this country off of arresting and detaining immigrants.
Right. And immigration detention is the extension of the prison system. And the prison system is nothing but a reaction to the abolition of slavery, right? The policing and imprisonment of Black communities really comes as a response to not having them to be slaves anymore. And so immigration detention, it really copies and mirrors what the prison system is like. The difference, though, is in the prison system during the criminal justice area, which means you still have some rights. We see on TV when people get arrested by police that they have to read their rights, right? You have the right to remain silent, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
In immigration detention, you don't, because it's the civil law. There's no crime in immigration. There's no victim in immigration. You just did a administrative mistake, which is not having a paper that tells the government that, yes, you're okay to stay here. And so because it's the civil law, you don't have those rights. A civil law, for example, is getting a divorce. So if you want to get a divorce, you don't go to the police, right? You have to pay your own lawyer, and you go to a judge, a civil judge. And so in immigration detention, you get to see a judge, but you have to pay for your own lawyer. You don't have any of the other rights. Absolutely not. And so you would imagine civil detention should be something very simple or not at all. Yet it exists exactly as it was a prison. And so that in itself, creating that environment of a prison-like detention, it requires money for those that are building it. So how are they going to get back their money when they literally build a prison? Well, it's charging us, the American people, the public in general, the communities in the United States, through our taxes. And we pay a lot of money. I don't really have the amount. I stopped looking at the amounts years and years ago. But every single day we're paying into the system. So, right now, over 37,000 people are detained in prison likes for immigration. And not only we're paying into that system, and this Geo Group and many, many other corporations are getting a lot of money every day for detention. They also don't pay taxes over it because they claim that this is real estate and people are their tenants. So if you own a house and you're renting it, you don't pay taxes over the rent that you receive. So they're really getting a free ride here, plus many, many other ways that they have developed the enterprise of detention. So there's not only Geo Group making money, there's a ton of companies making money off detention.
I say this all the time. You've heard me say this a number of times. And I think it's important to make this point, to connect some dots and to put this issue in context. And that is this. When you listen, for example, to the debate between Trump and Harris, the discussion is always about the border. All of these people coming to the border. And what are we going to do with all of these people streaming across the border? But what never gets discussed is the American foreign policy towards the countries in question that decimate the economies of these countries, that force these human beings to leave their homes to try to come here. For example, Donald Trump talked about the Haitians that were eating people's pets in Springfield, Ohio. Vice President Harris was just totally disgusted that Donald Trump made this statement, and rightfully so. But no one talked to her about her involvement in the U.S. reinvasion of Haiti and why so many Haitians why were those Haitians in Springfield, Ohio in the first place? Another example, Chiquita Brands was convicted in U.S. court in Florida, I want to say in September, for sponsoring death squads in Colombia. Nobody talks about the impact that these death squads were having on Colombians and then asking, why are these people coming here in the first place? Is that too simplistic of a point? Because I rarely hear anybody talking about the impact that U.S. foreign policy has on what was the impact that NAFTA had on Mexican corn production? What's the issue? What's the impact in Nicaragua, in Guatemala, in Honduras? I don't hear anybody talking about that.
That's a great point. I mean, I am a product of NAFTA in my country, right? The impact of NAFTA in my country, where all of a sudden there's no jobs anymore. People that happen to own their own land couldn't work it anymore because they couldn't compete with prices from products coming from the U.S. and Canada that have subsidiary, how do you say that? You know, the subsidies. And in Mexico, they don't have that.
Was that corn production? Because two things to that point. I'm sorry to jump in, but if I don't, I'll forget my point. When you get my age, that happens. One was dumping U.S. corn into Mexico. And the other element that I don't hear anybody talking about is the decimation of the domestic Mexican corn as American yellow corn pollinized the Mexican corn and eviscerated the domestic multicolor Mexican corn, which are two different types of corn. Is that correct?
Yeah, completely different. Again, those subsidies here to create mass production, immediate mass production, had to be generically transformed. Whereas the Mexican corn in Mexico is native. There's so many types, and you have to wait for it. You can just create like mass production for so many people. We didn't have to, because there were plenty of places and people cultivating corn. Yet what happened is that in preparation for NAFTA, our government, that also was elected by fraud at that time, Salinas, the President Salinas, he changed the constitution, because thanks to the Mexican Revolution in 1910, people now had the right to own their land that they worked. Yet he changed it as to now people can sell their land, which in the past was prohibited. You pass the land off to your loved ones, the next generations. And so they end up changing the law, because then when the products from the US and Canada come into Mexico, and Mexican producers cannot keep up with that level of mass production, they see themselves in a need of, well, what do I do now? And then, US and Canadians companies will come and say, don't worry, I'll buy the land from you. And they sold the land. So all of a sudden, you cannot compete. Now you lost your land. And now the products are completely transformed thanks to these generic products coming from the US, specifically corn. So that was like the first big hit to the Mexican economy. Canadians, they came in and started taking over the land to mine the land in Mexico and literally destroying, not only invading with generical change, transform corn or other products, but now you had that they literally come and dynamite our forests. So they're literally destroying an entire country. No wonder people will exit in mass numbers. But yet there's the offer of organized crime that serves the United States, specifically with drugs. What is the mass market of drugs of any kind? It happens to be the United States. And in vast numbers is white people consuming these products. So Mexico, as one example in the world, is just servicing the needs of the economies of the countries in the global north. Whereas, it could be US, Canada, UK, Germany, you name it. These countries have taken over our continents for centuries. Colonialism just looks different, and you keep changing the name according to the new policies they develop. In the past was colonialism. We got into a phase of neoliberalism, which we just talked about. Now we're going into fascism, right? Full fascism. But it's still the same point. How do other countries and their people become products to be consumed in the United States for the benefit of this big company, billionaires? Because I'm not talking about just people that consume drugs, because it is a problem. It is a public health problem. It's a sickness, when people get hooked into drugs. But I'm talking about like the mass, billions of dollars that are moved thanks to just a few people that keep doing this. And that's why we saw, billionaires coming into the picture of supporting Trump and his rhetoric against immigrants.
One of the standard lines that you hear is we have to deport all of these immigrants because they're taking the jobs from people in the United States. And I want to get into a deeper economic analysis, but a little bit later. But just on the surface, I'm originally from Sacramento, California, and when I was in elementary school, 7th and 8th grade, one of my dear friends, his dad owned an incredible amount of farmland, and so in the summer, as kids, we would go work for Mr. Dutra and picking tomatoes and cucumbers. And folks don't understand that is incredibly hard, back-breaking work that Americans don't want to do. So if people had a chance to go, for example, and I know you're familiar with the Imperial Valley in California, to go to the orchards in Washington State and pick apples and pears and other kinds of fruit, those, or go to the Midwest to the meat processing plants, those are incredibly hard, back-breaking jobs that Americans don't want to do. Again, is that too simplistic, or is the simplistic part of this the whole narrative that these immigrants are coming across our country, are coming across our border, and they're stealing all our jobs?
Well, I don't think it's very simplistic, but it's easy to understand, right? There are jobs that are still not, mechanized or taking over artificial intelligence that are so needed because they're the basics of the sustaining of the humanity, eating. Mm-hmm. That's as basic as that. And it is a really difficult job. It's not low skill. It definitely is not. It has been labeled low skill in order to excuse the low pay that they receive. It is important to name it because in the past you will hear a lot, and this time, this election run, it was mentioned a bit. These people are coming and taking your jobs. I've never seen anyone going into a company and saying, I'm going to take his job, kick him out, and I'm coming over. I have never seen such a thing of any kind of job. The decision of who
wait a minute.
the job,
There is one element where we at least could have a discussion, and that would be engineering jobs where American corporations are going to countries like India and bringing engineers here on special work visas because it's cheaper to hire an Indian engineer than it is to hire an American engineer. But short of that, and that may even be debatable, but that just came to mind as you made that point. Sorry to have interrupted you, but that just came to mind as you made that point.
Yeah, no, I mean, but the decision is made by the people that own the companies, right?
Correct.
It's not even the engineer.
Correct.
But they definitely, it happens. There's many places where people are pushed out, absolutely. But the decision is not made by the person that is taking over the job, because that person is going to do your job for less money. And why were they pushed? Because the company wants cheaper labor. That's what it's been all along in the United States. The history, again, let's go back to immigration history. Immigration, as the country has been taken over by Europeans and then form a supposed democracy, they think, what are we going to do with other people coming into the country? How are we going to stop them from taking over the country as we did, right? We don't want anybody else to come and steal it from us because we already stole it from someone. So one of the ideas was to put immigration under Department of Commerce. So they would only admit people from European countries as to create commerce only, not to stay. And then with time, that changed to, well, we actually need labor. And when they lost slavery, they couldn't own human beings as property and exploit them completely. Then they put immigration on their Department of Labor, where we're going to bring people to work for us for cheap and then kick them out. And so that is continuing until today, where people that come into the United States to work are not the ones deciding their salaries. They're not the ones deciding their jobs. They take the jobs that are available to them, because there's no jobs that, where you can earn a lot of money that would be offered to people that just arrived from Haiti or from Honduras or from Ghana to start with, because they're Black. So let's remember that the racism exists very well and alive in the United States. And you can have the best skills, but you won't be in positions of power or positions where you can earn more money just because the fact that you're Black, or maybe you're a woman, or you're indigenous, or maybe you're a member of the LGBTQ community, or we can go on and on. But, going back to the point that those jobs are needed. And as mass deportations have happened throughout history, in the recent history of the United States, you don't see a lot of mass deportations happening in regards to specific industries. As a matter of fact, there's always industries lobbying to have their workers at least stay temporarily, right? There's always corporations lobbying for that kind of visas that you were talking about, the H-1B visa, the H-2B visa. There are temporary workers that come and then they go. They don't want them to stay permanently. So the corporations are the ones running the country, and the corporations are the ones deciding who gets the jobs, what kind of jobs, and how much they get paid.
You just and to that point, you talked about how many of these jobs are classified, and they're classified as low wage. Is there a correlation between the job classification and the point that you just made, that a lot of people that are coming here, they don't have legal documentation so that they are able to be exploited? Is there a correlation between no papers, exploitation, and the labor rate.
Absolutely. There's no better excuse than to even criminalize looking for a job without a paper, than to make sure that people are easily exploited. I mean, what country does that? You have people that want to come and work, and you're like, no, that's a crime if you want to do that, which even then it's not a crime, right, under the immigration law. But they criminalized it, and having that as excuse to detain people. So again, when people go and work the fields, when they go in and do construction, when they clean the offices, when they take care of the children, everything is fine until the point is like, okay, now we don't want you here anymore. You did the labor, great. We hardly pay you. We didn't give you absolutely no labor rights. Now we want you out of here. We're going to vanish you from the country as you were never here, because we create the conditions so more people can come in the future. So it's a constant influx of cheap labor. If we didn't create the conditions for others to have to migrate, we would be worried and we would be like, oh, no, my God, no, let's give papers to everyone and ensure that they can stay. But because we continue creating the influx of more people coming due to the horrible conditions that we as the United States contribute to in the first place, we're like, there's more coming, no worries. So you will always hear those in employments where they treat people as low skill again, which is not low skill. If you don't like it, you can leave. There's more people out there like you waiting in line to get these kind of jobs.
And I'm gonna make a generalization here. Please forgive me. I mean no insult. Do you have any insight into the Latino community and its support for Donald Trump? In 2016, he made those horrific statements about Mexicans coming across the border and bringing crime and bringing drugs and all of that just racist diatribe foolishness. Then you go to October 26th at Madison Square Garden, this past October 26th, and the comments about Puerto Rico being an island of trash in the Atlantic. But there was still a very strong support for Donald Trump. When I was at the RNC in July, I interviewed a woman whose name escapes me out of Texas, who had started this organization, Latinos for Trump. And so can you help provide, and I know it's very analogous to Black Republicans, and how can there be Black people supporting Donald Trump? Got that. And if that's the simple answer, then that's the simple answer. But I wanted to ask you, because I know a lot of people watching this are wondering, how is it after a former American president can say some things as blatantly racist as that the people that are the target of his racism can still turn around and support him?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you made that question, because we have to talk about not only Latinos but people of color.
Mm-hmm.
People of color, supporting this kind of rhetoric, supporting this kind of ideas, and really getting involved in it. And we have to start with the fact that we were invaded in our countries. In the case of our continent here, we were invaded mainly by Spaniards, and we were made to believe that we weren't good enough. We're not white enough.
Wait a minute. And it's important for people to understand, when you say that you were invaded by Spaniards, that's Europe. A lot of people don't, because they don't understand geography and they don't look at maps. Spain's a part of Europe.
Yep.
Okay.
In Portugal, that's why Brazil speaks Portuguese. That's why most of us speak Spanish. But there were French too. There's the French Guyana. Look at the islands in the Caribbean, right? Mm-hmm. Some of them speak French too. And they even recently were still, part of the United Kingdom. And so how you're going to excuse going into somebody else's continent, taking over, stealing their lands, stealing their culture, their faith, their language, well, you have to tell them, actually, you should be thankful. You're welcome for the favor, because you're stupid, because you're no one. Even Rome, the Catholics, at some point decided that we needed to be invaded by Europeans because we didn't have a soul, that natives of this continent were not humans, right? And that's why we needed the Europeans to come, take over everything, and teach us how to be humans and look like humans. And that mentality, which is called colonialism, still rings today.
Mm-hmm.
And as racism is built and goes hand in hand with capitalism, how do you excuse the exploitation of people? How do you excuse the exploitation of Mother Earth? Well, you have to believe that this is necessary and that there's something wrong with us as people of color, that we should aim to be white, that somehow maybe if we get close to power, we're not going to be oppressed. We are going to oppress the others. That's how capitalism works. And that's why this mentality of the individual and success, as such a, look at the billionaires, they're so smart. Look at Trump. I heard somebody saying during the elections, we need someone that knows how to run businesses to run the United States,
right,
which made me laugh because he really doesn't know how to run businesses. He's been broke so many times, right? But as we have to believe that the oppressor is right and we should aim to be the oppressor, instead of actually understanding we are being oppressed and we shouldn't be oppressed. And so what happens with people of color, especially migrants, and yes, I've seen it a lot with Latinos recently because that's been the biggest wave right now. Yet there's a lot of Chinese coming in. Where I live in Seattle, there's a big community, Vietnamese community that came in the 70s after the war there in Vietnam. Yes. And so in order for us to arrive as migrants to the United States and be accepted legally by the system, you have to reject your country in the first place. You have to say, my country sucks, because you're in war with them, right? So yes, I also hate my country. And that's what asylum is about. Usually it's coming and saying, I hate my country is horrible, please let me in. And you have to already start from there to reject yourself and your origins to be accepted here. So that's why you have people approaching power like they did, Latinos did, were Latinos for Trump. And there might be other people of color as well that were like, well, I'd rather get close to the power. I'd rather look like white because I don't want to be oppressed. I want to be the oppressor. And, to me, that's a very important distinction, because when people talk about, these communities have to come and assimilate to what? To hate and to xenophobia and to Islamophobia and to homophobia, to hating myself for being Mexican and being dark-skinned. That's what really drives communities of color to approach and support this kind of horrible people and rhetoric against ourselves.
Rumination with Andrew made the point. Sorry, Dr. Leon, I hate when we lump people into one box. The Brazilian, Dominicans, Mexicans are Latinos, yet different people. And Rumination, I understand that. That's why I premised my question by saying I'm about to make a generalization. And because for the sake of expediency and asking the question, I did that, but I prefaced it on the front end. But then he talks about the Catholic Church mobilized Latinos to vote for Trump. Any thoughts on that?
I actually saw some Catholic churches mobilizing against them because they're worried about what could happen to them for supporting migrants. Let's go back to 2006. Remember the big marches, the millions of people on the street? They were actually mobilized by the Catholic Church because of that bill, the Sensenbrenner bill, that was calling for creating felonies for anyone that supported undocumented immigrants. It was a very complicated law, but I'm not going to go into the details. Bill that didn't become a law. But yeah, there's a lot of evangelical churches that supported Trump, right? That support the Republican Party. There's a lot of faith groups that supported them and still support them till today. And yes, every community is different. Even in Mexico, every community is different. But yes, I understand that, sometimes as a block, we are lumped together. And sometimes, for us, it's important to remain together, even though we're so different. That's why I went into people of color, right? Beyond just communities from this continent. Because what we've seen in detention is communities from many different countries that sometimes have nothing in common except that they're people of color.
And one more question about, again, here's the generalization about Latinos and your point about assimilating. Because I heard some analysts saying that there are those, not all, but there were those in the Latino community who believed that supporting Donald Trump would shield them against the reaction of MAGA to deport them, that they saw that as some type of a shield and a protection, not really realizing when they start knocking on doors, they're not going to look to see if you got a MAGA hat on. They're going to listen to your accent. They're going to ask you for your papers. And if you don't have them, you're on your way out of here. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's how oppression works. Let me give you an example. There's a lot of Chicanos here in the US that don't speak Spanish. And why is that?
Define a Chicano, please.
Oh, yes. Chicanos are the second or third or fourth generation of Mexicans that have lived here for way before the United States was invaded.
When California was still a part of Mexico.
California, Texas, all the way to Oregon, Nevada, New Mexico, you name it. It was a huge region. And so Chicanos are seeing themselves as Mexican Americans, right? But they don't speak English, most of them. I mean, Spanish. They only speak English. And so they always feel like, oh, why my parents didn't teach me? And then if you ask their parents, it was for protection. It was so you wouldn't be treated as Mexican. So you would pass as American, and you would speak perfect English without accent. And so it always happens. There's this oppression makes us so afraid and isolated that we want to protect ourselves and our families. We make decisions out of love without knowing that protection is actually what the system has set up for us to hurt ourselves. And so you will see that constantly happening with communities across the history where we make these decisions that we think is to protect ourselves, but we're not. We're isolating ourselves even further. We're siding with power even further. That's what I was saying at the beginning, that people make this distinction of, do I side with power or against it? No, if I'm against it, they're coming after me. I better side with them. So we become the protectors of the system. We police each other to remain, just stay in your lane. Don't go outside your lane. Why do you create problems? Like if you want to create a union at your job site, there might be people that worry about you and they're like, no, don't do that. Why you want to create problems? Don't be a troublemaker, right? So that mentality is part of the assimilation process, where we think that we're protecting ourselves and our loved ones by siding with power.
Talk a little bit about the new president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum. She replaced AMLO, and first female president of Mexico. She has a last name of Sheinbaum. She's Jewish. And if you could talk just a little bit about, because there are some people that have been asking the question, wondering whether or not she's a Zionist. Tell us a little bit about Claudia Sheinbaum.
Yeah, she's of Jewish origins. She says she's not a practicing Jewish. She's from a very wealthy family in Mexico. She has a PhD. She was the governor of Mexico City before becoming president. Yes, this would be the first time Mexico has a woman as a president. And she sides with all the policies of the former president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, AMLO. I don't think there's going to be a lot of difference on how he ran the country, as we expect she's doing that now. AMLO did follow a very clear history and tradition in Mexico of siding usually with countries that the U.S. is against. So Mexico has always sided with Venezuela and with Cuba, right? And other countries that the U.S. has literally created embargoes and made their life impossible because they wouldn't side with the U.S. Yet they always side with the United States as well. And so AMLO, when Trump won, he came to visit him and he said thank you, regardless of what he had already said about Mexicans and he was doing against Mexicans. And when it was announced that Trump had won here the presidency, her reaction, Claudia Sheinbaum's reaction was, well, it's not too bad. So that points to the fact that she's going to remain under the same conditions that, AMLO had set up, which is to side with the United States, to, sign in favor of other countries. Maybe sometimes they will do something really very tangible to support other countries, but not all the time. But in general, I know there's a big debate in Mexico of why Mexican presidents have to side with the U.S., because literally the U.S. have the economy of Mexico in their hands, right? With tariffs and everything else. But I believe that there's something called dignity, which I haven't seen in Mexican presidents in relation to how they, react or respond to this kind of rhetoric against their own country.
Rumination with Andrew says, Dr. Leon, I believe Trump is using illegal migrants as a means for militarizing the border, so both U.S. citizens, marginalized groups in particular, need to be alert. The U.S. empire operates in code. I think that was one of the points that I was going to get to with you, is that right now, immigrants are the target, but what we are really looking at is the militarization. Donald Trump is talking about declaring a state of emergency in the United States so that he can so that he can use the military, not only the National Guard, but the Army, to round up folks, deport folks. So we're looking at the militarization and the increase in the incarceral state in this country.
Yeah, I mean, he already tried it last time, right? They tried mobilizing National Guard, and the border with Mexico is already heavily militarized, which actually is, a copy of the Israel border with Gaza. As a matter of fact, the Border Patrol is trained by Israeli forces for many years now. And so, when Trump took office, and my case of my deportation case began, we said it. We said this is not only coming after us; they're coming after everyone. The surveillance and monitoring that I was talking about, the program that has already existed since Immigration Customs Enforcement was created in 2003. That surveillance against immigrants has been expanded to everyone in the country. People haven't noticed. Have you seen, when you take a plane, how now you have to do facial recognition?
Yes.
It's now implemented in all, I've seen it in all airports that I've been at. But did you know that you can opt out? Every time I go into a plane and they ask me for my picture, I say no. And I can see the staff going like, why would you do that? It's only a picture. I'm like, I don't want you to take my pictures. I don't have to. And they having a hard time because they're so automatized right. Of let's just do it. And people just go there and look at the camera and that's it. That level of surveillance already exists. And it started with our communities. So we've always said they're using us. We are the experiment to later go after everyone that is poor, that doesn't have power, that is black and brown in the United States. This is not exclusively of immigrants. We are the easiest target, but that doesn't mean they're going to just stay against immigrants. And we already saw it on their Trump first time, right? He went after Black Lives Matter. He went after Antifa. He went after labor. I mean, you name it. Women. It's just everywhere. It's just people tend to forget and isolate, the news, and it's not their fault, because the system, look at how mainstream media is, how social media is. It's really isolating us from generality. So that's why this space is so important, because I really love the name of your show, Connecting the Dots, because that's not happening in most other places where supposedly there should be an analysis of how these all connect together.
Rample says, and I don't know if he's serious in making this statement, but I'll read it anyway. I don't understand your statement about the militarization, Dr. Leon. Well, people need to understand that it is illegal for the army or for the military, any branch of the military, to operate domestically. The military is a entity that operates on foreign soil and is to protect the United States against invasion from outside entities. The National Guard is the element within the military that is legally able to operate domestically. By Donald Trump declaring a state of emergency, he then can violate that standard operating procedure. He can then call upon the military to operate domestically, as in rounding up illegal immigrants and putting them in internment camps, as that happened to the Japanese during World War II, Japanese Americans during World War II. So hopefully, Rample, since that answers your question. And Daniel Drazovich, thank you for your super sticker. Maru, is that a 30,000-foot answer to the question?
Yes, I mean, it's definitely worrisome that, again, for one excuse that they're using against immigrants, they want to pull all when we're talking about the military, I mean, I'm already scared of police.
Right.
Yeah, they already have like these heavy weapons, right? They're just massive weaponry that local police have. Immigration Customs Enforcement, same thing. It's supposed to be for civil, yet they carry these big, long weapons. They arrive, in 4 or 5 unmarked cars. They don't even wear uniform. So when people get detained by ICE, the first thing they think is like, am I being kidnapped? Is this like organized crime in the United States? Who are these people? Now you pull the military. They are literally killing hundreds of people, thousands of people, millions of people across the world. Mobilize here is just already a scary thought, to think that communities will be facing that. In Texas is already doing that, right? If you go to El Paso, you'll see so many uniforms and weapons around, and you don't know which one is which, because they have their state patrol. I can't remember what they're called. They have the
Texas Rangers.
They have Texas Rangers. They have like 4 or 5 different units, police units from local to national level already deployed in Texas. And so just to think how that's going to look like for the rest of the country. And what if at some point they just decide to, say nobody goes out, and now we declare martial law, right? Now you can move. You can go places. You by 8 p.m. you have to be home, and if you're not, we're gonna arrest you. What are they gonna do to people? And yes, and look what they did to the Japanese American community. There's a group called Suru for Solidarity. Suru is the Japanese name for crane, for the bird. And so Suru for Solidarity came together precisely in the response of how the Trump administration was separating parents from their children, and their children were being detained at Fort Field there in Texas. And that's the same location where Japanese Americans were brought into, one of the many concentration camps in the 40s for Japanese Americans. And Zuru came to say, enough is enough. They did it to us. We are the children. We're the product of that generation that is still traumatized till today. 40, 50 years later, they're still traumatized. Look what we're doing right now to our community. What's going to happen to our future children? What's going to happen to future generations? Because the level of militarization and oppression is going to be way higher than it was for Japanese Americans during World War II.
Sherry asked the question, how much would the rounding up and deportation of all these people cost? I just read a piece that talked about Trump's mass deportations would bring economic disaster. He's got this incoming border czar, Tom Homan, says that we can't put a price on national security, but according to the American Immigration Council, arresting, detaining, and deporting the 13.3 million people who are either in the United States illegally or temporarily without legal status could cost $315 billion. Your thoughts on any of those numbers?
Yeah, they're impossible. I can't even imagine $1 billion. I just have no idea, how much the money is. I just know that money could be used for housing. There's such a crisis of housing right now in the country. Look, I'm in Seattle. Before last night, there was a big storm, a bomb cycle.
A bomb cyclone.
Yeah, cyclone. It was huge. There were a lot of houses. We lost power. I'm right now using my hotspot because Wi-Fi is nowhere. Right, okay. It's been 2 days and we have no Wi-Fi. One woman died in an encampment in Linwood. That's North Seattle. She was living on the streets, and a tree fell on her, and she died. How is it possible that in 2024 we still have people living on the streets, and we're not even thinking about the need for housing, healthcare, education? So many schools closing. We're in 2024, and we're thinking not to even put $1 into the most basic needs of everyone in the United States: housing, healthcare, and education. It's just really ridiculous to think that, again, how these decisions are made, who makes them, and yet we're still blaming immigrants, even for housing. When they were saying that immigrants were taking over housing, I was like, which housing? I have not seen. Let me know where, because I'll go take some too, because I don't understand. Developers here in Seattle, we're in the city with the most expensive housing in the nation.
Right.
And it's all developers that have taken over the local city council. The progressive council members that we have are gone. Now they're all servicing the interest of these this number of developers that are controlling the city. And so it's not only about the money, right, that they're thinking of using. Who's taking the money? But let me tell you something. In order for this detention enterprise to continue, there has to be an influx of immigrants coming into detention, right? So both the detention industry and the agro industry, the service industry, all these industries, construction that we talked about that need immigrants, both of them are going to need continued influx of immigrants. So it is not convenient for both systems to all of a sudden just deport everyone. Even for Trump, wouldn't look like okay, we got rid of everyone and that's it. Then who do you blame next?
Right. Going back to Mexico's President Sheinbaum, and in 2016, Donald Trump was talking about building the wall and getting Mexico to pay for it. Do you have any and we know that didn't happen. Do you have any insight into the potential relationship between President Sheinbaum and Trump? And is she going to write a check to pay for this wall?
I doubt it. I mean, unless she does it with the money that we send back to Mexico. So here's the other thing. Mexico needs the money that Mexicans send.
The remunerations, the money that Mexicans in the United States make every month and then send back to their families all over Mexico, Central and South America.
At international level, Mexico has always been top one of international transfers, right? And so, and this is another industry, you know, Bank of America, a lot of the money they make is based on those transfers. So Mexico needs those monies. It's not convenient for Mexico. As a matter of fact, there's a conversation right now. What would Mexico do if all of a sudden we all get deported? They not only they don't have jobs for us, they don't have housing for us. What are they going to do without the money that we send? So that's an important thing to take into consideration. I think that Sheinbaum is going to do the same that AMLO did. Say yes, comply to some things, and others you don't have to. You won't comply to those, but just keep Trump happy and look good in front of the cameras for him to not have the excuse to come after your country. You remember this Republican that tried to have a bill to send the military into Mexico?
Yes, from South Carolina.
Right. I don't remember.
Lindsey Graham.
Oh, it wasn't Graham. Okay, so I can't remember who was it, but it was.
Well, I know Lindsey Graham. There was an African American couple that went to Mexico. I think the woman wanted cosmetic surgery, and she wound up getting kidnapped on the border. And Lindsey Graham came on national television and talked about, we need to invade Mexico. I know Lindsey Graham was one of those talking that foolishness. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. I can't remember who was the one that filed actually the bill.
Okay.
But it didn't go anywhere because they don't have that power. Like, again, most of what politicians do is this big rhetoric, right? Rhetoric that for many reasons cannot be realistic. It cannot be really done, but yet it harms a lot. It does create impact. And that's the part that I really want to talk about. We know that, again, realistically, yes, they have the infrastructure, but the businesses are going to be like, wait, why? Don't take my workers yet. I need new workers. And you're closing the border and you're not letting people in. So what am I going to do without workers? And then the prison industry on immigration, they're going to be like, wait, I need more people detained and you're deporting them all. And now I have empty beds. I need more people detained. See? So that's really where we're going to see the results. We're going to see photo ops. We're going to see theatrics at the very beginning of the Trump administration. They're going to be grabbing people left and right, and they're going to continue doing it during whatever years they're in office. But at the same time, many industries are going to come and say, no, I need my workers. Let me bring my workers. And that's really where everything gets moved. All the decisions are made by these big corporations. They're going to be the ones saying who gets in, who gets out. And based on that, governments such as the Mexican government will have to react. Are they going to close the border again? Are they going to keep more people in Mexico waiting to see if they're let in? I think there's going to be a lot of repetition of that.
Final question for you, and thank you. You've been so gracious with your time, and again, for you early this morning. Thank you very much. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, is echoing or parroting a lot of the anti-immigrant rhetoric that's been spewed and coming out of the mouth of Donald Trump, and policies that have been coming out from the Biden administration. And you being in Washington State, very close to Canada, are you feeling a pressure, a North and South pressure? Are immigrants being squeezed from both sides of the continent?
Absolutely. We started noticing a couple of years ago an increase of migration from Canada to here, and not necessarily Canadians, but from other communities. And that was in response to the militarization of the southern border and impossibility of letting anybody in, right? And yet people, migrate to Canada to come here, but also those that remain in Canada don't want to stay in Canada. And so we've seen for years and years how the Canadian government has even sometimes surpassed the horrible and inhumane immigration policies that the US have. So, for example, Canada has indefinite detention for immigrants, and they had it for many years now. And so we've seen also a lot of efforts from communities there. They were really close to move legislation for regularization. And that's something that is happening in many countries, especially in Europe, with a lot of migration from Africa. People have organized and fought back. And they have, Spain was also really close to ask for regularization. They don't say citizenship because they don't want to create this level of, some are more than others. And also citizenship in itself is problematic, for example, for us here in the US, because if we ask for citizenship, we should really consider how citizens are treated already. For example, Black citizens, Native Americans, they're not treated as citizens, right? And so we should not be asking for citizenship when others are not treated as such. So we're going more for the term of regularization, which means having the right to come in to a country where you're pushed to go to in the first place. So Canada had those push in legislature, and they got stuck thanks to the rhetoric of the fascist, elements in Canada. And according to Trudeau, he was anti-Trump, but yet they all really follow the same, not only policies pre-Trump, but even after Trump.
And you just mentioned indefinite detention. If you could quickly define that.
Indefinite detention means that someone could be in detention while waiting for a deportation proceedings forever. There's no limit to when they should be released or deported.
In fact, I know I keep saying last question, but to that point, one of the talking points that we hear constantly is this whole detain and release. And we're told, oh, they come to the country and then they get arrested and then they get a court date, but they don't show up to court. And that's just not true, because nobody is going to spend the money it costs to get here, risk their lives to the degree that they have to get here, and then finally get to court to make their appeal to stay and then not return. I want to say the number is less than like 95, is less than 5%. It's a very, 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 very small number. Quickly, if you could, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, lately since Biden and Trump, when people come into the country and ask to stay, they're not putting a process to obtain papers to get an immigration status. They're putting deportation proceedings. And so when you are detained and you request a bond, for example, you're just paying money to be released from detention, but the proceedings continue against you. And yes, the over 95% of people that have been placed in deportation proceedings non-detained, they show up to court. People get detained with the excuse that, no, you need to show up to court. Yet vast majority don't even get to court because they get deported, or they don't get the right to see a judge, because sometimes they're not even told that you could actually request a hearing. So the system in itself is set up for people to fail. The immigration law system is so most people are not able to obtain papers. So that's why, remember I said at the beginning, we are told, oh, you're here without papers. That's wrong. And we're like, okay, where do I sign up for the papers? Oh, no, there's no papers for you. It's a catch-22.
It's a catch-22. Wow. Well, as always, and I know this is your first time being on this show, but it's not the first time having you on my show. Maru Mora-Villalpando, thank you so much. Where can people go? Is there a website that people can go to look more, to find out more about your work and to support your work? Where do people go?
Yeah, there's laresistencianw.org and latinoadvocacy.org. And we're in Instagram as La Resistencia NW. And I have now Blue Sky. Everybody's leaving Twitter and going into Blue Sky. And on Blue Sky, I'm Maru Mora-V, as for Villalpando.
Again, Maru Mora-Villalpando, thank you so much for joining me today. As always, greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Folks, thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned for a new episode tomorrow. We are going to have economist Dr. Linwood Tauheed, and we're going to be talking more about this immigration issue. We're going to be talking about Trump's tax claims and tariffs. You're going to get some phenomenal insight tomorrow from Dr. Linwood Tauheed. Please follow and subscribe, leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. You can find all the links below in the show description. And remember, folks, that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter on Connecting the Dots. See you again tomorrow. Until then, I'm Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a great day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.